Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Sara Lubratt. I'm going to be attempting to replace my phone screen time with writing, which I was a little concerned about looking at how much screen time I had. It's still going to be a lot, but it's also less than I was anticipating, so I'm grateful for that. This is also specific to my phone screen time. We're not even going to talk about like how much screen time I spend on my computer, but the majority of my freelancing now is done on my phone. I'm a social media manager. It's what pays the bills as I'm working on publishing my first book, but it does mean that I spend a lot of time on social media like Instagram and TikTok, which are just like black holes where you feel like you scroll and as soon as you swipe past a video, you can't remember what happened in the previous video. And yes, while I do that for work, I'm also on my phone a lot for non-work things. And it's also kind of funny because I'm still going to be writing on a screen during this, but at least it's productive screen time instead of just like staring into the void of social media. So for this week so far, which again was lower than I was expecting, I was out of town for part of it, so I might be cheating a little bit. But so far this week, I have spent an average of 5 hours and 32 minutes a day on my phone. So tomorrow I'm going to be attempting to write for 5.5 hours. I am a little bit nervous about this, I'm not gonna lie. Even when I am like being really consistent with writing, I feel like my creativity taps out around like 2 or 3 hours. So even going from that, which I'm not in right now, I'm not in like a super consistent creative stage, but even if I was going from the 2 to 3 hours to basically doubling that to 5.5, is going to be a challenge. But for part of tomorrow, I'm going to be leaving my apartment to go write because I tend to do longer creative sprints when I'm not in my own space. There's something about like leaving the domestic responsibility behind and not knowing that I could be doing laundry or dishes or literally anything else in my apartment other than writing. So at least I'm going to start my writing off that way by going somewhere else to get started. And then I will probably finish my writing back in my apartment later on, hopefully with like a pretty healthy break. I'll probably have dinner and everything like that and then keep going. I'm kind of nervous. I think that it's going to be very good for my productivity, especially because I haven't felt like I've been super in the creative groove. So I'm hoping that this will help me get back into that. It also has the potential to completely burn me out. Anyways, my fingers are crossed. I'm hoping that this is like a healthy decision, but we will find out at the end of it. I am very excited to see how much I can get done in 5.5 hours. That sounds like such a long time, but I will also be working on 2 projects. I'm giving myself that freedom because I think if I did 5.5 hours in one project, I would completely burn out. I would not be able to do the 5.5 hours, and I think giving myself the best chance of finishing that is to give myself the possibility of working on these 2 projects. So those 2 projects are book 2 of my high fantasy series that I call Project DE. It has a title in my brain, but Project DE is the abbreviation of the original concept of the book that is no longer relevant, but that's how I've talked about this book for a while. That's probably how I will continue talking about this book until it has an actual official title, whether it's the one that I currently have in my head or not. And I believe I'm about 12, maybe 13,000 words into that project right now. I do not have an outline and I don't really know what happens next. So I could see myself either working on a new chapter for that draft, or I could see myself outlining for that. Also, this is open to other ideas if something else pops up, but I'm going into tomorrow with these 2 concepts. The other project that I'm hoping that I'll probably do some work on is editing my fantasy novella that I'm currently calling Project Veil, which is like 22,000 words. It's meant as a quick read. I wrote it relatively quickly. It was so nice to write something fast and be done, but I have not looked at the rough draft in a while, and so I might choose to start rereading that or start editing that. I should probably read through it and then decide to make big picture changes instead of starting to like tweak little things, but that is the other thing that I can work on, and honestly rereading that is probably going to be how I spend the majority of my time tomorrow, because that will be like the easiest creatively on myself, but I also want to use this time to push myself, and I definitely think I will be pushing myself. So that's the goal. I will see you guys tomorrow for some writing. Good morning. Today's the day that I told myself that I was going to write more than my screen time was this past week, which is 5.5 hours. And honestly, I'm a little bit nervous. I think it's mostly just because I'm like realizing like, oh my gosh, that means that I have to write for 5.5 hours. I'm trying to reframe that to I get to write for 5.5 hours, but that's still so much longer than my normal creative spans. It's currently 9:30, and the best way to fight any kind of stress is by taking some kind of action. So I'm gonna start my morning off with half an hour of writing just to slowly start knocking down that number. You can see the mountains. Cute. My first 30 minutes are now done, which is great. That means I only have 5 more hours to go. But two things, actually 3 things, but 2 things. I looked back at my word count tracker, which is just like an Excel sheet that I keep track of my words in, but I have only written once in the last 27 days. Technically twice. I guess I must not have updated that after I went on my last trip. But even then, that's like twice in the last month. Secondly, this writing sprint actually felt pretty easy, which is great. That's a good way to start. I spent it going over my original books 2 and 3 outline, which doesn't have a ton of information, but at least gives me some kind of a direction. I went over that. I figured out what is still relevant. I kind of wrote that over into a different document. I added some new ideas just because like where I had stopped writing in DE last time, I had no idea where the story was going to go. I didn't know how I was going to get from that point to the major points in book 2, but at least now I have a little bit more of like a clear direction. So that went well. My first 30 minutes are done. In like an hour and a half, I have a meeting, and then shortly after that, I'm going to the coffee shop with my friends, which will hopefully lead to a couple really solid hours of writing at the coffee shop. It's currently super overcast, but if it gets sunnier later today, again, it's like 10:20 now, but if it gets any sunnier later today, I had the idea last night that maybe I go for a hike to kind of break up my writing. And yes, that would be great if it's sunny enough and if it's not muddy. So I'm not totally sure about that yet. Either way, I would love to watch the sunset if there's a sunset this evening. But as of right now, I need to have breakfast, do a little bit of work, pull myself together for the meeting, and then get ready to go to the coffee shop. Okay, meeting went really well. I just signed a new client. I'm very excited about that. And now I'm on my way to do some more writing at the coffee shop. Wish me luck. I was able to write for 2 hours and 15 minutes at the coffee shop. When I first got there, we talked for like half an hour, so I did not get to count that part, obviously. So now I'm at a total of 2 hours and 45 minutes for the day. I did make myself sit there for a couple extra minutes because I was really close to hitting 1,000 words added to book 2 of Project DE, but I was also able to add a bunch to my outline. I think I probably copy and pasted over maybe about 800 words. I honestly didn't really look at it, but since copy and pasting stuff over, I was also adding ideas, and now my outline is at 1,600 words, which could mean that I'm roughly at 1,800 words for the day. I'm not going to actually count the words that I put into my outline for my total daily word count that I'm going to put in my spreadsheet, which kind of sucks because I'm like, those are still words, like those should still count, but they're not technically in the document. So I don't know how I'm going to handle that yet, but have felt very, very good until the end, where I felt like I was just kind of like staring at my screen. I was like 30 words away from hitting 1,000 words written in that session, and I was just staring at my screen, but I got there. But I figured out something that will then happen next, which is, you know, even more helpful and also beneficial in hitting those 1,000 words. So it is now 3 p.m. I have, what is that? Another 2 hours and 45 minutes of writing to do today. That's so much. Normally I would stop like here and be like, wow, I did so much. This was such a good writing day. And all I can think about is like, wow, I still have 2 hours and 45 minutes more to go, which means that I've done half of my writing for today. Okay, well, joy. Now I definitely need a break from writing. I'm gonna go run an errand, and then I will talk to you guys after that. It's now 5:30. Picking up the new Hunger Games book was not the errand that I had intended to run, but I was passing a Barnes & Noble on my way home, so I had to swing through and pick that up. I'm very excited to start reading that, but I still have 2 hours and 45 minutes of writing I told myself I was gonna do today. I am feeling very tired. There are fewer clouds in the sky, which is good news, but I don't know if I have the energy to go hiking today. I can definitely still watch the sunset. I can find somewhere to do that. But I think how I'm going to spend a majority of the time that I have left that I want to work on writing today, I want to spend that rereading my fantasy novella that I wrote this past fall. And because it's a rough draft, I don't want to start immediately line editing. So I think I'm going to print it out so that I can reread it, take notes on stuff I want to change, and just try to stay like back in the big picture mindset instead of like down in the weeds of line editing. So I'm going to go print that, and then I need to eat something, and then we're going to watch the sunset. It is just about to be 6:30. The printer did stop printing at 25 pages, and I think the story is like 49. So about half of my novella. That's gonna get me started. I'll take it. The printer ran out of paper, so I can't really do a whole lot about that right now. There wasn't any extra printer paper down by the printer, so that's okay. It's gonna get me started. I am just like thinking about how I still have 2 hours and 45 minutes that I need to do. So I don't know, I just need to start to like make a dent in that remaining time. If I can get it to like an hour and a half, I think that that would feel like much more reasonable. Not reasonable, but like doable. I'm just procrastinating. I just finished eating dinner, but I just feel like I'm just sitting here and procrastinating. I'm gonna grab a pen, I'm gonna grab a notebook, I'm gonna grab the printed pages, and I'm gonna leave my apartment to go somewhere to do a little bit of rereading. It got cloudy again. It's pretty dark outside now. There was no sunset, very obscured by the clouds. Worked on rereading the Veil Project for about an hour and 15 minutes, which means that now I have an hour and a half left. So at least I was able to make a dent in that. I totally told myself that I wasn't going to line edit, and I totally spent that entire time editing 4 pages. So I was definitely line editing. When I would come across like a phrase or a sentence or a couple of sentences that I didn't like how they were phrased, and if I couldn't figure out how I wanted them to be phrased in that moment, I would just put parentheses around them so that later when I'm focusing more on the line editing, it was kind of like how I was getting around the fact that I told myself I wasn't gonna line edit, that I know that those are things that I can come back to just because I didn't love the way they read. And either I do that when I'm retyping things into my computer later after making notes on these sheets of paper, or I do that, you know, a couple months from now. I don't have a plan. That's just kind of like how I was going about that. I did have a couple good ideas for things that I need to add to the first few pages, which I think is going to be really beneficial. I do like how whenever I've printed out pages of my stories to work on editing by hand, I do like how it makes me think about it a little bit slower and a little bit more in depth. That could also be like the intensity of how many hours I'm trying to spend working on my creative projects today. But either way, something's working and it's feeling really good. I am definitely a little bit tired and I feel like I just need to move. So either I need to do a productive break where I'm doing my dishes or something, or if I just let myself watch some YouTube or a show while using my walking pad, whatever it ends up being, I just need to like move my body a little bit. I did my dishes. It's now 9 o'clock. I'm gonna sit down and try to do at least 45 minutes more because I think that is half of what I have left. I think. I should probably look at that, but I'm gonna look at that after I do my next 45 minutes. I'm also switching pen colors to pink. My first session was in green. I just like the visual separation of having different colors. I also do that when I'm typing on my computer. I color block my different writing sprints or my different writing sessions just so that I can visually see that progress. Okay, that was half an hour, not 45 minutes, but I've been sitting on the floor, so I think I just need to stand up. I did another 3 pages of line editing. Like I said, I was not going to, but I have had some more good ideas with that I think will ultimately be beneficial to the story. And I found a couple places where I like want to move sentences. I want to move like a paragraph in one spot. I need to move that up like 3 paragraphs earlier. I need to move something else down. So I'm kind of also figuring out slightly the bigger picture things that I told myself I was going to work on. Okay, so I just did the math. I'm currently at a total of 4 hours of working on 4.5 hours. I'm currently at a total of 4.5 hours of working on DE and Veil for today, which means that I have an hour left, which means 2 more 30-minute writing sprints or editing sprints if that's what it turns out to be. It's now 9:40 p.m. It's not too terribly late, but I've been really struggling with staying up later recently, so I don't totally know what I'm going to do with that information yet, but I have 2 more half-hour writing sprints and I can totally do that. That in and of itself seems very feasible. So I guess I need to figure out what I'm doing for my next productive break. Okay, I'm back. I had a snack. It's now 10:30. I have an hour left. I can do this. I'm gonna start now. I just finished up page 10 of handwriting my edits. It's 11 o'clock, which means that I have half an hour left. I'm gonna give myself a short break to just like chill out and watch a YouTube video, but my hope is to be done before midnight, which means that I need to start my last half hour in the next like 24 minutes to be exact. And then I'll be done before midnight, and I'm so close to doing 5.5 hours of writing today. That's a crazy sentence. That's so long, which like makes sense that and I say we, I'm on my phone that much. And honestly, again, I kind of cheated because normally I'm on my phone more. I know that like all of the apps and stuff like Instagram and TikTok, etc., have algorithms that are meant to like feed our dopamine so that we stay on the apps. They are designed for us to stay on them. And so it makes sense that we spend so much time on them, but it's also so important to do other things. And I'm just thinking about like how much I would get done so much faster if I were to do even half this time every single day instead of being on my phone so much. It's 11:15. I need to start my last sprint and then I can be done and I can go to bed. I have 10 more minutes until I'm done. I just finished. It is now 11:52 p.m. I did my 5.5 hours and, probably my 5 hours and 32 minutes, but I'm not counting the 2 minutes. I'm actually like incredibly impressed with myself. I'm not gonna lie. Writing was the primary goal today. So I understand that this is not super accessible for people with more responsibilities than I have. And I was able to make this my priority today, which is not lost on me. I ended up getting through 13, almost 14 pages of my printed out editing pages, which considering the novella is like 49 pages, that's almost a third of it done in this editing pass. That statement alone is nuts. I did find myself making lots of like the parentheses of things that I want to go back and rephrase. So I was obviously not rephrasing some things in this pass, but I also think that just pointing those out to my future self is going to be very helpful, especially because when I'm staring at it on a screen, I get stuck because I'm like, what about this isn't working? Whereas when I can hold it in my hands and I can see the printed out pages, it feels a little bit differently to be like, oh, that's the sentence that doesn't work for me. And I did find myself, putting things in parentheses like 5 to 8 times a page, but I'm editing a rough draft. That is just bound to happen. That's how I write my rough drafts. I had a word jump out at me that I was finding on a couple pages that was like ruining sentences for me, and that was even. And so I kept putting those in parentheses because I'm like, I have to revisit the sentence if there's an even in it. I do also think that printing this out was super beneficial. I think that it was really helpful that I have not worked on the Veil project in like 3 months. So I'm able to come back to it with clearer eyes. And I'm not gonna lie, I know I'm biased, but I think it's pretty good. And that's awesome to feel that way about my writing. Obviously needs some polishing and some like fixing up and some more details and stuff. But I think what I'm doing in this pass, even though again, I said I wasn't gonna line edit and that I was just gonna write my thoughts down in a different notebook, that didn't happen. I think I'm coming up with some really good ideas. I think I'm coming up with some really good phrasing changes, and I'm really happy with how that went. And that's just this. Not even to mention coming up with like an outline or part of an outline, or at least progress towards an outline, and things that I want to write about next in book 2 of Project DE, because I'd been feeling stuck on that for like a month because I kind of wrote the opening, which is like the first 12,000 words, which is probably too long for an opening, but I don't want to talk about that. I basically wrote everything that I knew about the beginning of the story, and then I was like, cool, how do I get from here to the next part of the story I know, which is the climax? And clearly a couple of things have to happen between the 12,000 word point and the climax. But I came up with some things, and then I started working on a chapter and I got like 1,000 words done on the chapter. Not to mention like 800 or 1,000 words done in an outline, which are not words that I'm counting towards like my DE book 2 total word count or anything. But I wrote 1,000 words for that. I wrote 1,052 words today in book 2 of Project DE. I edited 14 pages, or at least, read through 14 pages, which if that's 14 out of 49 pages and the whole thing is 22,000 words, that covers almost 7,000 words in the Veil project, which means that in total across my writing, my outlining, and my rereading, I dealt with 9,000 words today. I didn't write 9,000 words. I'm not claiming anything crazy like that, but I dealt with 9,000 words today. That's crazy. Like, I'm genuinely floored. I do think that I was able to accomplish the 5.5 hours because of a couple things. One of them being that was the main goal for my day today. And I structured it so that I would have a writing sprint or that I would leave my apartment. That was another big beneficial thing. But I would write and then I would do something else and then I would write again. I left my apartment several times throughout the day just to write in different places. Going to the coffee shop and having the accountability with my friends for a little over 2 hours was super helpful. I love having accountability partners. planners. I think the fact that I printed out the Veil project so that I could edit by hand instead of just staring at my screen, even though my computer screen and not my phone screen all day, was super helpful and a lot nicer on my eyes than I normally am. I think it was super helpful that I was able to switch between two projects and that the two projects were at different stages so that I wasn't just trying to write all day, but that I got to write and then I also got to work on editing. Not to mention editing, but a third of this project, and yes, it's a novella, and yes, it's 22,000 words, but it's still a third of it. It was still like 7,000 words. I am floored, honestly. I know that social media is literally designed to keep us on it with the cheap dopamine hits, but today felt like really long in a good way. Like I feel like I got so much done today because I did, instead of just staring at Instagram, which again is like partially my job. But we're gonna ignore that fact because even when I am doing work on a social media app, as soon as I'm done working, I get sucked into scrolling for at least 30 minutes, like every single time. So I know I'm losing time that could be used more beneficially elsewhere. And to think that like 5.5 hours, even though it's often a lot longer than that, spent on my phone on social media doesn't feel like that long. I clearly can get a lot done in that time if I use it for more productive things like writing and editing and outlining. I'm just still baffled. I was really nervous that I wasn't going to be able to finish this, especially after leaving the coffee shop earlier today. I was super tired. I was kind of feeling burnt out. Not burnt out, but like tired of writing. And then that's when I switched over to editing. And I think that that was the right call. I don't think that I could have written super actively for 5.5 hours today. So again, I'm super grateful that I had the two projects that I wanted to switch between. I know I said I was worried about burning out, but after today, I'm just being reminded of how much work I can get done if I consistently show up and write for an hour or edit for an hour. I think this was actually really helpful for me to do after not having written in like a month. I think it was a little bit of a brutal reminder, but also a very helpful reminder that chasing real dopamine like this in the delayed gratification instead of the instant dopamine hits that we get from being online, like this was so good and I got so much done. I don't think you need to go this extreme unless you want to, but I think that this writing experiment was really helpful for me, and I hope that at the very least you choose to close out of the app after watching this video, or at least stand up and walk around for a few minutes, or maybe you go write a couple sentences for your book, or you go read a couple pages of a book that you're reading and just pull yourself out of the algorithm loop for a moment. This was so incredibly wonderful. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe if you have not already. If you have any other suggestions of writing experiments you want to see from me, make sure you leave them down in the comments below. Let me know if you would ever try something like this. I seriously didn't think I was going to, especially when my screen time was at like 8 or 9 hours a day, but I'm so incredibly glad I did. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm Sara Lubratt, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!